luck.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. Are you comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister?
Which is it?
Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday,
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan.
GB News royalty with
Your perfect start to the weekend.
Lucky Us.
Feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions.
That raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return.
And a few surprises along the way.
Might be cold in this studio.
That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9 only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 9 p.m. This is Patrick Christys Tonight with me, Ben Leo.
And to those who say that the only way to love your country is to hate your neighbour because they look different, I say, not only do we reject you, we know that you will never win.
Keir Starmer used his tone-deaf conference speech to whitewash concerns over immigration and blame the riots on skin colour. Meanwhile...
But seriously, the flutes gave me so many opportunities. My first ever trip abroad was to Malta with the Croydon Youth Philharmonic Orchestra.
Have you ever heard of a working-class child going to the Mediterranean to play flute in an orchestra? Also today...
The Tories, with their mates in reform, are just becoming right-wing wreckers.
It was arson, it was racism, it was thuggery.
The Home Secretary's own big speech was 1,800 words long. She said the word immigration just 4 times. And...
I don't think the story's true. I'm not quite sure where it's come from, but we've no plans to change the pub opening hours.
Yet another Labour civil war is brewing, this time over closing pubs early. Are they determined to finish off our boozers for good? And
it is clear now that if we change how we treat women in prison, we cut crime.
They've already let prisoners out early. Now they want to scrap female jails altogether. So is Britain safe under this government? Tonight's panel is ready to go. I'm joined by columnist and broadcaster Esther Kraku, director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity, Stephen Wolfe, and political commentator Jonathan Liss. Oh, and did this gaffe sum up Starmer's day?
I call again for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages, the hostages.
Starmer's bum note conference speech is next.
Good evening, I'm Sophia Wenslow with your headlines just after 9 o'clock. Sir Keir Starmer has defended the cut to the winter fuel payment in his first Labour conference speech as Prime Minister. He promised that every pensioner will be better off with Labour thanks to the triple lock. He outlined a vision for national renewal, including reforming planning, ending the doctor strike and launching Great British Energy, which he confirmed would be based in Aberdeen. The Labour leader also pledged to house all veterans in need, saying homes will be there for heroes. He also said young care leavers and victims of domestic abuse will be given a guaranteed roof over their head. Sir Keir Starmer went on to address the riots across the UK sparked by the stabbings in Southport.
I will never let a minority of violent, racist thugs terrorise our community. The debate is not about the worth of migrants. That is toxic, but we must move beyond it. It's about control of migration. It's always been about control.
Meanwhile, the Justice Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, has set out plans to slash the number of women going to jail and ultimately close women's prisons as the country battles an overcrowding crisis.
And it is clear now that if we change how we treat women in prison, we cut crime, we keep families together, and we end the harm that passes from one generation to the next. And for that reason, I am today announcing that this government will launch a new body, the Women's Justice Board.
In other news, the Defence Secretary John Healey has chaired an emergency COBRA meeting today to discuss the escalating crisis in the Middle East, while the Prime Minister has called for restraint and de-escalation. It comes as Israeli airstrikes continue to hit Hezbollah positions, with the Israeli military claiming it has killed Hezbollah commander Ibrahim Mohammed Qubaisi in an airstrike on Beirut. At least 560 people, including women and children, have been killed so far in Lebanon's deadliest 24 hours in decades. Now, police in Switzerland have made several arrests after a woman reportedly ended her life using a so-called suicide pod. It's understood the capsule made by Sarco has never been used before. Police in the Schaffhausen region said they arrested several people on suspicion of inciting, aiding and abetting suicide. Assisted dying is legally protected in some circumstances in Switzerland, but the Sarco pod has encountered some opposition. And the government says securing an agreement with striking nurses is an essential step to restoring public services after they turned down a 5.5% pay rise. Two-thirds of Royal College of Nursing members voted against the deal in a record turnout of 145,000. Labour Minister Pat McFadden insists the government understands the challenge of balancing public spending while trying to treat workers fairly. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Ben.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good evening, hope you're well. A massive political show in store tonight after, of course, Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper's speeches at the Labour Party conference earlier today. Here's a flavour of what the Prime Minister had to say.
This is a government of service. And that means, whether we agree or not, I will always treat you with the respect of candour, not the distraction of bluster. And the truth is that if we take tough, long-term decisions now, if we stick to the driving purpose behind everything we do, then that light at the end of this tunnel, that Britain that belongs to you, we get there much more quickly. And if you can't take that on faith, perhaps because you're concerned about the winter fuel allowance, then I get that. As I say, if this path were popular or easy, we'd have walked it already.
Well, I'm not sure about you, but I thought that was a great example of how to talk a lot without saying much. But let's get the thoughts of Olivia Utley, who's on the ground in Liverpool, who's been analysing all the action today. Olivia, you must be knackered. You've been there since the crack of dawn and indeed for many days. But listen, Sir Keir Starmer came into conference off the back of that plunging popularity poll, where actually he was worse off than Rishi Sunak in the ratings. Did his speech today do anything to make amends for that?
Well, this speech was sort of trailed to be a nugget of hope for the British public after what's been quite a lot of doom-mongering from the Prime Minister in recent months. The message that Keir Starmer was supposed to be giving tonight was, yes, there are difficult times ahead, but if we make those tough choices now, if we make those difficult decisions, then there is light at the end of the tunnel and there is a chance of a Britain that we can all be proud of. That was the message he was trying to get across. I think the problem for Keir Starmer was that there was very, very little detail in terms of actual policy announcements. You expect a Prime Minister's speech at a party conference to be sort of pretty thin on the ground with policy announcements. They save those for the budget, for maybe the King's speech. But this one had almost nothing. And I think there were quite a lot of people, both within the Labour Party and perhaps in the wider public too, who were hoping that that message of hope might be accompanied with perhaps some little nuggets of optimism for the near-term future. But we really didn't see very much of that at all. Very, very little policy detail. All we saw really was this promise that he would give more housing to veterans. And when quizzed on that, it turns out that veterans are going to be moved higher up the social housing list. It doesn't sound like an absolute cast-iron guarantee that all veterans will be housed, and there was no timeline on that. He also announced, but we were all expecting that too really, that Great British Energy will be based in Aberdeen. That's a little boost to the people of Aberdeen and the surrounding towns, but nothing sort of, no big announcement for the country. Also, of course, he has been caught up for the whole week in this freebie scandal. And this, it might sound like sort of nonsense fluff, one of those Westminster stories that people don't care too much about, but it really does matter. For a start, there's obviously the fact that there are now Conservatives and other parties suggesting that the Prime Minister has been hypocritical, that he's paints himself as a socialist and is then spending all of this other people's money on making himself look good. But I think what's more important is that people are now questioning the Prime Minister's political nous. The Prime Minister ran a very, very tight ship for all the years that he was in opposition. And during the election campaign, the Labour Party was incredibly disciplined, almost never going off message. But ever since they've got into power just 2.5 months ago, that discipline seems to have really slipped. And a lot of MPs I've spoken to have actually been questioning perhaps the wisdom of the people around the Prime Minister for not warning him about this. You remember, of course, that the Prime Minister was only elected as an MP in 2015. He is still a little bit wet behind the ears, and I think that is beginning to show. I think it would just finally be remiss of me not to mention, as it was sort of the highlight of the speech, the enormous gaffe from Keir Starmer, where he accidentally, when talking about wanting Hamas to release the hostages, he accidentally said the sausages. And that's been the main takeaway from that entire conference speech, which I don't think is exactly what the Prime Minister would have wanted.
No, what a shame for him. It's that's the part of the speech that's been making all the headlines. I mean, I kind of feel sorry for him, but a slip of the tongue came at the worst possible time. Olivia, thank you so much for your analysis. We'll catch up with you tomorrow. I think Wes Streeting's making his speech tomorrow, the Health Secretary. But let's get the thoughts of my panel tonight. I am welcomed by columnist and broadcaster Esther Kraku, the director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity, Stephen Wolfe, and political commentator Jonathan Liss. Jonathan, love your trousers.
Thank you.
Where are they from? All the important matters first.
I can't actually remember the brand right now, but I'll get back to you.
Teasing you, some viewers suggesting that they are akin to maybe sort of clown trousers or jester trousers, which
I don't need any assistance.
Some would say is fitting for the Labour Party conference today. What do you make of that? What did you make of this?
I think they're very fetching. I think
they
match the colour of your eyes as well. You know, I love it when you wear clothes that match your eyes.
I'm so glad that someone in this channel actually really likes me. I have more of this, please. What did I think of this? I sort of agree. Obviously, Olivia's coming at it from a particular angle. I mean, it wasn't a game changer. I think that if you liked Keir Starmer before, you'll still like him now, although obviously we know there are fewer people that like him than maybe did at one point. And if you hated him before, you'll hate him now again. So, you know, I think that Labour's got itself into a trap with the... we're into fuel cuts, and this would, you know, now it's a question of kind of strength and kind of credibility, so they have to carry on with it even though they don't need to.
So
it's always a mistake.
What was your favourite part of the speech? What most impressed you?
I think that when he was talking about a national renewal, I think that's the kind of thing that is going to hit home. And how
what does that mean?
He said that it wasn't about delivering a few Labour policies well. It was about the way that we can actually change the country. Because I think the one thing that we can all agree on was that people in this country do want change. People were voting against the Conservatives, but they're also voting against what they saw as a stagnation in the country.
But Esther, I can't recall any policies he talked about on stage today. I mentioned it over there. He talked a lot, but I really don't understand what he said. really.
Yeah, it was very, like Olivia said, very thin on the ground. I mean, look, I'll start with the positives first, because I think it's important to at least say something. It's clear that he's been working with a speech coach. He had some sort of impactful pauses, should I say. It was a lot more polished, and I've noticed that about him. So he's making more of an effort with his image, which is something. That's the positives. The negatives.
You can say that again with £2,000 specs.
Yes, well, yes, but I think he's being, particularly on his comments about sort of the Southport riots and all of these things, I think he's being deliberately obtuse. I think he's choosing to ignore the elephant in the room. And I think the key takeaway that many people are going to take from what he said, particularly about the Southport riots, is the fact that, you know, it was, and Yvette Cooper's speech, it was the racists that are trying to divide this country, is people that are divisive and all of that. As if the country would be rejoicing if the person that murdered 3 little girls at a Taylor Swift dance class was white.
Yeah.
And I think most people are not going to pretend like that's not really the message that he's sending, or the fact that he didn't really address people's concerns around not just immigration, but integration.
Yeah.
Right? You can have a neighbour, but are you on the same page about the values that you're sharing, the space that you're sharing?
I'm going to do a whole...
And people are going to remember that.
whole segment at the 10 o'clock on their trebling down on the riots and the race row. Stephen Wolfe, what is a right-wing wrecker? Bit of a mouthful. What's a right-wing wrecker that Yvette Cooper talked about today?
Well,
any idea? Well, are you one?
Well, I obviously clearly am, because I'm somebody who believes that we should have a managed migration policy controlling those people who are coming across illegally on asylum. I believe that we should have low taxation, businesses should be supported, we should be looking after our own military. All of those sort of things are regarded as right-wing wrecker. But what I'm interested about Keir Starmer is that there he is trying to project himself on the world stage as somebody who is sensible. Martin Luther King had a speech, I had a dream. John F. Kennedy talks about we can go to the moon. And what does Keir Starmer say? Sausages.
Oh, okay.
Come on. That's what's going to go. Miliband had bacon sandwiches. He's going to be reminded for his sausages.
I don't think
I think he was trying to go for the whole Democrat line of joy. But again, most people are saying...
joyless. He was channeling his Gordon Brown.
It was also empty. How do you feel joy when you have a Prime Minister wrapped in the scandal of accepting over £100,000 worth of freebies, and yet he's taking away the winter fuel allowance for pensioner who's probably just £8 over...
I don't think this thing is a scandal. I think that what you've had in the last week is 4 different issues put into one pot. So you've got the issue of political donations, which we can have a big conversation about in this country. How do we fund politics?
Which shouldn't exist.
Because we don't have a publicly funded model of politics. Then you've got the issue of freebies, gifts, etc. Then you've got the story about Sue Gray and salaries and stuff like that.
But Jonathan, this is coming to the crux of what he's trying to project. He has attempted to project himself as being a sensible adult in the room, competent, bringing back responsible government. And yet, on the contrary to that, there we have him doing the opposite. Instead of handing back the money that he's taken away and saying that contributes to those people that we're taking cash away, he's actually overseeing a group of people now which is legitimising low-level graft.
I think that we have to be serious about this. We can have a conversation about gifts, but it's the majority of people who took money actually in the last year were Conservatives, more Conservative MPs to buy the Labour, and the Conservatives took more money.
Labour have been running on for years saying, look at the Tories, look how disgraceful they are. Look what they do.
No one ever complained.
Let me finish. The moment they get into power, they do the same thing.
Absolutely.
They're massive. And do you know what? I don't think anyone can trust anything Keir Starmer says. Look at this clip.
But seriously, the flute gave me so many opportunities. My first ever trip abroad was to Malta with the Croydon Youth Philharmonic Orchestra.
So just before that, he was banging on about how he grew up in a working-class household, working-class background. What working-class child goes to the Mediterranean to play flute with his Philharmonic Orchestra?
What do you mean? Working-class people can't have access to music?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it's very expensive. Music lessons are very expensive.
To be fair, it was when growing up in my estate, first Moss Side and then Burnage, that would have been seen as something only for those on the upper middle class.
But we know he went to a grammar school.
It might well
he
have
went
been
to a grammar school.
Yeah, and it might well have been. But
Doesn't mean he's not
exactly
working
that
class.
same thing. He's gone to a grammar school and now he's trying to take away the opportunities for people like
No,
me
he's trying to
who
give
got
people
out
the
of
opportunity to
working-class
have music
environments, who
classes,
won
Stephen.
bursaries to go
He's trying to give
private
people.
schools.
Look, I think that a lot of the
That seems trivial, but it's not. He's banging on about being working class and knowing how
He
working
is.
class. Well, I don't know of any working class kid in my age, from millennials, who went abroad to play instruments.
He was in
a Philharmonic orchestra.
I don't know if this is. I'm sure this is not what you're trying to get at, but it does sound a bit like what working class people should know their place and not have aspirations to things.
I have to agree with Jonathan, just because it doesn't make a difference to me. I don't really care about the perception of what working class kids do or whatever, or the fact that his father was a toolmaker, which I can't believe he doesn't see the irony there. I'm more interested in the substance. I'm more interested in what he wants to do for people, and I don't think there's much there. And I think this whole kind of polished facade, and he has polished his image a lot more. He's much more competent public speaker. But that's what makes me distrust him more, because he's confidently saying things and almost gaslighting the public. You can be a much more polished speaker, but to then say something all the riots or all the distaste around immigration is driven by hate.
The sense is desperation.
A problem.
He is desperate to try and appear to be back to be working class, when he spent most of his life escaping it and remaining away from it and not involving himself in it. The guy that sets up a set of chambers as a barrister, along with those people who got money off those people who were challenging.
Well, so he should have just worked a manual job. Is that what you're saying?
No, I didn't get a manual job.
So what's the problem then?
I recognise that I'm still working class. My family are still there, and I don't go around attributing all these benefits. Economically, you're not working class anymore.
No,
you are not.
Okay, fine, but that's not an economic argument. That's not an economic argument.
It sounds like a trivial point, and you may laugh at me for it, but I just don't understand. I know many working class people. I come from a working class background. I don't understand how a working class child, unless they're very, very lucky, will go abroad
but maybe he was
to Mediterranean
lucky
to play the flute in a Philharmonic orchestra.
He was lucky. He's saying that, and he wants other people to have the same opportunities he did. That's completely legitimate.
Yeah, OK. All right, time for our Great British Giveaway, a bit of a gear change, and your chance to win the equivalent of having an extra £3 in your bank account each month for the next year. That's a whopping 36 grand in tax-free cash. Maybe you could go abroad to the Mediterranean and play your instrument in a Philharmonic orchestra. Here's all the details you need to make it yours. Very good luck to you. We're still nattering about playing the flute and being working class. Honestly, I just think it's just inauthentic to do that, to say you're working class and playing the flute. But anyway, we move on. Still to come, what does this mean?
The Tories, with their mates in reform, are just becoming right-wing wreckers.
Yes, that was the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, who lashed out at the Tories and Reform, accusing them of fanning the flames of last month's riot. So is she right that the Tories, with their mates in Reform, are just becoming so-called right-wing wreckers? Bit of a mouthful. Reform UK MP Rupert Lowe goes head-to-head with a Labour advisor, James Mathewson, in just a tick.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
When I knew that I was doing this segment this week, I feel like this week was a real homework task for me, because I'll be honest, I haven't been around Scottish food much in my life, but I obviously know all the obvious. And I thought I'd bring in a selection of some of, I guess, the quintessential culinary delights of the North. I mean, we have in front of us haggis.
I think we should begin with some haggis.
So, Michael, I've never eaten haggis before. This is going to be the first time.
Well, have you eaten anything like haggis before? Have you eaten anything that is made from the intestines of an animal?
I mean, I've had things like chopped liver and, you know, a bit of offal here and there.
Well, there we are. I mean, I got a great surprise. I was holding a great... When I was in government, I was holding a great party in Scotland, and I had a lot of Spanish visitors, and I was offering them haggis, and I thought that they would be astonished by haggis and maybe repelled. But when they ate it, they said, oh, no, this is morcilla. So, you know, there is an equivalent in Spain.
Absolutely.
So if I recall, and you've probably been mugging it up, which I have not, but haggis is made within the stomach of a sheep.
Yes.
And you take the heart and the lungs and some other part of the sheep and you mash it up.
With onions, oatmeal, suet.
Yes.
And it's stuffed into the sheep's stomach. But a lot of the haggis you get these days, especially sort of the slightly cheaper varieties in supermarkets, it's usually an artificial casing. You know what? This is actually quite nice.
I think it's absolutely heavenly. And
It's
to me,
very savoury.
To me, it's two things. Yes, to me, it's two things. It's both the taste and the texture. You quite rightly referred to the oatmeal going in there. So it's got this crunchy, granular sort of texture. Marvellous.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. Are you comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister?
Which is it?
Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday,
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion, Mark Meets, and My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The king of breakfast TV is back. That's right. Britain's favourite TV host, Eamon Holmes, returns to Britain's hottest breakfast programme. Breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Patrick Christys tonight with me, Ben Leo, only on GB News. Time now for our head-to-head. Now, while Sir Keir Starmer might have taken centre stage at the Labour Party conference today, the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, was also speaking. And it was her comments about last month's riots that certainly raised some eyebrows.
I've been shocked by the response from some of those in political parties on the right who once claimed to care about law and order. After rioters attacked the police, they should have given full-throated backing to our brave officers. Instead, too often we've seen them undermine the integrity and authority of the police. The Tories, with their mates in reform, are just becoming right-wing wreckers.
Cooper was, of course, referring to last month's riots that were sparked by the death of 3 girls at a Taylor Swift dance class in Southport, with many on the left quick to label the rioters as far-right thugs. So tonight, I'm asking, was the Home Secretary right that the Tories, with their mates in reform, are just becoming right-wing wreckers who make excuses for the mob? Let me know your thoughts by heading to gbnews.com/your say or tweet me at gbnews, and while you're there, vote in the poll. I'll bring you the results very shortly. Going head-to-head on this now are Reform UK MP Rupert Lowe and former Labour advisor James Mathewson. Good morning to you, good afternoon to you, or good evening rather. I'm so used to doing breakfast and morning shows on this channel, it's wired in. Rupert, I'll start with you. Thank you for joining me. What is a right-wing wrecker, and are you one of them?
Well, firstly, Leo, let me say that I don't think in the history of this country we've ever been led by such left-wing virtue signalling, pork-barrelling clowns, which we've now got in power. To call us right-wing is a misnomer. We are not right-wing. We are simply representative of the British people. And the reason that people are voting for reform is because the duopoly, which is Labour and the Tories, have increasingly moved to the left, supported by a very woke media. And at the end of the day, they've lost sight of what reality is. So what we represent is reality for the British people. And I frankly think that whilst nobody condones violence, if Yvette Cooper, Keir Starmer, and the other sort of gift-receiving Labour Party front bench, ultimately, if they don't listen to the public quite rightly is concerned about mass legal and illegal immigration, which is the root cause of all our problems. And if they don't address that, then we will be doing to Labour what we did to the Tories last time. And red wall seats will all go to reform. And I don't think it's fair to call us right-wing. We're not right-wing. We're just representative of common sense, decency and the British people.
James, Reform have 5 MPs to Labour's 400 plus. Why is Yvette Cooper even mentioning them in her speech today? I mean, I heard more about Reform than I did her policy on immigration.
Well, she's talking about the safety of the country. She's talking about security. She's talking about our police force, which is her responsibility. And she would be wrong not to mention the riots because they were such a news piece. I mean, we had rolling coverage, including on this channel.
Well, what's that got to do with Reform?
What does it have to do with Reform?
Yeah, what have the riots got to do with Reform? Rupert Lowe donates his £5 a month salary to charity. I mean, what's he got to do with rioting?
Sorry, Ben, I think Rupert Lowe can defend himself. I don't think he needs you to do it. So what you see from Yvette Cooper today is exactly the situation, exactly the reality. It's talking about Reform. She's talking about many other people, including Reform, not just Reform, but those people who stirred the pot, those people who, on political platforms, and that's the crucial thing here, actually encouraged or allowed this activity to happen in communities like the community that I come from in the northeast of England, where businesses were destroyed, the police were attacked, and we had complete loss of law and order. We had rolling coverage of it. Of course we did in the media, as Rupert says, the woke media, apparently, which I don't know if that includes you, Ben, but I would love to know what his definition of woke is.
Only on weekends, James, only on weekends. Rupert, you must admit you are, if not far right, Reform is indeed widely accepted as centre-right.
I don't accept that. I get very irritated by... It's largely a sort of BBC, the woke, monopolistic BBC, which does not represent... Can I speak, James? You've had you've given us your little bit. And at the end of the day, you talk about protecting the police. Well, you haven't done very much to protect the 2 policemen who did an extremely good job at Manchester Airport, who are currently sitting in limbo because nobody is actually dealing with the issues. So I think for you to start speaking about the way the police are being treated, I think you need to take a good look at that before you start preaching about that. But what I would say is we are not far right. If Labour and the Tories, as I call them, a duopoly. They're, as George Galloway says, they're 2 cheeks of the same backside. They have lost touch with the British people. I mean, London, I think, is a lost cause, but actually outside London, in my old constituency, the West Midlands, in other parts of the country, where I actually run businesses, unlike James, who I think most of his career has been in the media. At the end of the day, these are real people who have to work extremely hard for their living. They don't pork barrel a living on the back of a bloated state, which is what we now have. And they've completely lost touch with reality. We've got 9 million people who aren't working. We've got a society which is dysfunctional. We're far too highly taxed. The state is far too big. There's absolutely no accountability to the taxpayer, which is the British public. And at the end of the day, radical change is needed. And if people don't vote for Reform in the next election, there's not going to be very much left of Great Britain, because I can tell you something, this economy is not going to improve
let me bring
under
James
a
in.
Labour government that hasn't got a clue.
James, you talk about law and order, but does law and order look like setting thousands of prisoners free before their sentences are up? Or closing female prisons, as the Justice...
I would rather deal with what Rupert just said, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course.
I haven't worked in the media my whole life at all, Rupert. I left school at 16 with no GCSEs. I worked my whole life. I've worked through the trade union movement and ended up by accident in politics. You, however, are a private schooled individual who was in the City of London as a banker.
I'm proud of that, James. I'm proud of that. I'm proud of that. You can try and impugn me for that. I'm proud of it. So that doesn't mean anything to me. That's water off a duck's back.
One at a time, because we can't hear otherwise.
Don't talk over me, Rupert, right? You were a privately schooled, educated individual who ended up as a banker in London, who is now trying to convince working class people, like the families that I come from, the communities that I come from, that instead of looking at people like you, who have crashed our economy over many, many, many decades, that instead they should look at people and they should punch down.
How have I crashed the economy?
Let Rupert answer that, please.
People who are coming here with very little, who we are housing in temporary accommodation because the Home Office has got a huge backlog, who are then being attacked by fascists.
What a load of absolute piffle and dribble,
like
James.
Let Rupert respond, please.
Absolute dribble.
Absolute nonsense.
Dribble. And what you need to do, how have I crashed the economy? I've fostered businesses, I've employed people, I've got businesses that have been going 100 years. You speak to the
You're a
staff who work
banker,
for
mate. You're a banker.
You cannot say that.
Elite.
You're talking the usual.
James, let him finish. James, you've just gone on, so you need to let him finish.
We have to put up with.
James, you need to let him finish if you go off on a tirade with accusations. How did he crash the economy?
How have I crashed the economy?
Right, listen. The point is, what I'm
answer
saying
the question if you would.
We have got a man here who is pretending to speak for the working class of Britain, who knows less about the working class than anybody. He knows less than you or I, Ben. He's not remotely working class. He's as working class as Nigel Farage. And you do not represent...
What? So what? Go and speak to my constituents in Great Yarmouth.
People in the
Go and speak
working
to them.
class communities from which I come, Rupert, turn down
You're
your
talking class drivel. Class
turn.
drivel, that's what it is. You can't do
It's
anything
absolute
except
nonsense.
talk.
You are
Broadly
the
speaking,
elite.
class drivel, James.
All right, we're going to call time on this, gents. James, I would just say, you're saying that Rupert and Reform are out of touch with the working class. They've won swathes of votes from the working class, and polling suggests that the red wall, after voting Labour, is going back to Reform.
Ben, are you a spokesman for the Reform Party?
No, I'm just telling you what happened in the election. I'm telling you.
I thought you were here to moderate.
Sorry?
I thought you were here to moderate. You're not moderating.
I am. James. I'm just giving you some facts about the election and polling. That was it.
Give some facts the other way. Give some facts about the Reform Party. Give some facts about the fact that we have seen Nigel Farage use his political platform to divide people and cause violence against people who are coming here.
Okay, he'd reject that.
Absolute hatred and division throughout the country.
James Mathieson, thank you. Rupert Lowe, thank you for
joining. You're a sad man, James. You're a sad man.
Okay, we'll leave it there.
Mate.
Thank you very much to you both. OK, that was spicy. Who do you agree with? Is the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, writes that the Tories, with their mates in Reform, are just becoming right-wing wreckers? And your verdict is now in. 96% of you agree that no, Yvette Cooper is not right, while 4% of you say that she is correct. Let us know your thoughts on that debate, by the way. gbnews.com/your say. Did you agree with James? Do people like Rupert Lowe, the Reform MP for Great Yarmouth, are they able to get in touch with the working class despite their background? Likewise, Nigel as well. Let us know. gbnews.com/your say. Coming up next, first we had Starmer's outdoor smoking ban, then there was a proposed sugar and salt tax, and now, can you believe it, they've been forced to deny rumours that the government is considering restricting pub opening hours. So is Labour unfairly punishing the small businesses that form the backbone of the British economy? I'll be joined by the owner of the Sandon pub in Liverpool, Kate Stewart, in just a few minutes.
Good evening. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office on GB News. It's going to turn dry for most overnight tonight. It's been a much drier day across England compared to Monday and the weekend, but there is more rain to come across the south tomorrow as this weather system starts to approach. It was this low that brought the heavy rain over the previous 48 hours. That has been clearing away, but we're still seeing quite wet conditions over northeast Scotland today. We've also had this northerly wind, which is introducing cooler air across much of the country overnight tonight. But the showers are tending to fade. We will see a few more across southern England and South Wales. It will stay quite mild here, double digits, but elsewhere with that cooler air coming in, we're into single figures and some pockets of frost likely across parts of Scotland first thing tomorrow morning. We'll still have a few showers coming in first thing as well, getting into northern Scotland, but these central parts of Scotland, that blue hue on the map, that is telling us, yes, temperatures are going to be down to freezing or a touch below through some sheltered glens. A bright start there for much of southern Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some sunshine tomorrow, just one or two showers along the north coast. Perhaps a few showers over northern England, but a good part of northern England, North Wales, actually having a fine day tomorrow. Quite grey to begin with across southern counties of England and Wales. And here comes the rain, just edging back in, initially across southwest England, South Wales, but spreading more widely over southern England and up towards the Midlands come the afternoon. As I mentioned, much of northern England, Northern Ireland, a good chunk of Scotland actually, just dry and bright tomorrow with some decent spells of sunshine. But it will be on the cool side, temperatures struggling into the low teens. A little milder further south, but not feeling all that mild with the wind and the outbreaks of rain, which will push north on Thursday and could cause some further issues as this line of rain kind of grinds to a halt. So we do have a Met Office yellow warning in place over much of northeast England, parts of southern Scotland, Northern Ireland and North Wales also seeing a wet day, but in the south turning a little milder and a little brighter on Thursday.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment. This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss my big opinion.
Mark meets at My Take at 10. Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Britain I grew up was the most peaceful, gentle society that has ever existed. That has been destroyed.
Opinion polls show immigration is the #1 concern to the British public. Are you proud to be British?
Yeah, I'm ever so proud.
My name is Stephen Edgington, and in this documentary, I want to find out how Britain became a nation of immigrants. Immigration, the truth, available at gbnews.com.
Patrick Christys tonight with me, Ben Leo, only on GB News. Now, away from Keir Starmer's speech today, a plan to change pub opening hours in order to tackle harmful drinking has caused a massive split in the Labour Party. Yet another one, of course. And that's just one day after they were proposed at the party's conference. Speaking to GB News this morning, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, Pat McFadden, poured cold water over the plans.
I was asked about this in a couple of earlier interviews this morning. I said I might be joining those 5 trade unions that you mentioned and put down a resolution about it. I don't think the story's true. I'm not quite sure where it's come from, but we've no plans to change the pub opening hours.
All right, well, he says no, but that comes after the Minister responsible for Public Health, Andrew Gwynn, suggested that, quote, tightening up on some of the hours of operation at pubs and bars should be considered as part of efforts to tackle alcohol abuse. Well, I'm joined now by the owner of the Sandon pub in Liverpool, Kate Stewart. Kate, good evening to you. First of all, you're, of course, in Liverpool where the Labour Party conference is taking place. Have you had any Labour MPs that you've had to bar today or over recent days after this idea?
I wouldn't even let them in, Ben. And that's the God's honest truth, the way it's going. I mean, obviously today has been another massive blow for us in the pub sector. And let's break it down a little bit, Ben. So what they're proposing, let's say we close a pub at 10 p.m. in the night and nobody wants to go home. They're going to go to offline centres, they're going to go to supermarkets, get lots of alcohol, go back to houses and drink. Without a pub landlord there to say, we're not serving you anymore because you've had enough, or the weights and measures are in place. So we're in a pub, you're getting 25 or 50 mil. You can pour to your heart's content, and that's where the problems are going to stem. You know, Gwynn said about antisocial behaviour. There's going to generate so much more antisocial behaviour by drinking in houses. In a pub, you have security, you have staff, extensive CCTV. In a house, you've got neighbours sitting next door with, you know, massive amounts of noise. So that eradicates that. You know, he's saying about detrimental effects of the NHS. If the NHS can survive the 70s, 80s and 90s, when people wasn't educated on drink, they can survive this. You know, Starmer is so vocal as well about, you know, we all have to shoulder the burden, you know, we've all in it together. But you're destroying an industry that brought in £54 billion last year. What are we going to do once that goes?
Yeah, and of course, as we mentioned, it comes off the back of the smoking ban in gardens. You've had a rough time through COVID as well. Do you ever get the feeling pubs are just being used as a scapegoat for the real public health crisis, which, of course, we all know is obesity?
100 million %. You know, Gwynn is never going to stand up and say to these multi-billion-pound fast food joints, you can't sell that many burgers. Take a few burgers off that. You've got to shut early. That is never going to happen. Always, it's the hospitality sector who is destroyed by all of Laurel and Hardy's plans, because that's what they are. They're just a big, massive joke. Pubs are vital. We've seen how much people miss pubs in COVID, coming together, socialising. People work all week and want a little bit of downtime. We are not a nanny state. We are grown-up individuals with our own choices to make. How dare they dictate to us what we can and cannot do, and I am sick of it.
Okay, Labour insists this isn't happening, but they used to say that about lots of other things which have come to fruition. If this did happen, what would it mean for you and your pub? Would you be forced to close?
Look, pubs are hanging on by a thread already. You know, they're closing by the day all over the country. By doing this, this will probably be the end of the pubs. I mean, it'll only be very, very few and select pubs that will survive this. £54 billion gone from the economy. Hundreds of thousands of people left unemployed. Leave pubs alone. Do your own job. You know, you're not doing a very good job of that. We know how to run pubs. We know how to be responsible. Leave us to it and go away.
OK. And Kate, aside from Labour nipping at your heels, what's the biggest challenge now for pubs in the UK?
You know, we've got the inflation of prices. You know, the breweries are putting it up, the VAT are putting it up, our costs of electricity is going up, you know, the mortgage rate's gone up, everything is against us. You know, the minimum wage keeps rising, we get no tax breaks off anyone, so we have to pass that on to our customer, and then the customers can't afford it anymore. You know, there has to be a point where you say, we can't charge anymore, and our profit margins shrink and shrink and shrink to the point where it goes, I can't do it anymore.
That's the thing. Even if they did introduce this ban, surely people would just go straight down to Tesco or wherever, you know, other supermarkets are available and just buy loads of tinnies and take home. It's not going to stop people drinking, is it?
No, not a chance, Ben. And the thing is as well, they are never going to say to supermarkets, you can't sell that many. You see people coming out to supermarket with caseloads of alcohol, cases and cases and cases. They don't put any jurisdiction on that and say you're only allowed to buy one case,
but
or
Kate,
you're only allowed...
sorry to interject. Sorry, I would say the Tories did nothing to help pubs either, though, did they? Let's be.
Yeah, but they didn't do anything to help us, but also they wasn't so intent in the first few weeks of being in, of destroying us as well. So already you've had, we're changing the pub glasses, we want to make pints smaller. Then you've had no smoking in beer gardens, and now you've got to shut early. They've only been in a few weeks. What are they going to do in a few months?
Yeah, and there's also talk, Kate, of Labour bumping up alcohol duty in the October budget, but we'll see. Kate Stewart, we're going to have to leave it there. Save me a crisp, cold one next time I'm up in the North East.
Always.
Thank you, Kate. Good evening to you. Yeah, OK, yeah, I feel bad for the pubs, especially after COVID. I mean, what they had to go through. Do you remember all the what is it, sausage rolls or pork pies and all that kind of nonsense during COVID? It's been non-stop since then. Anyway, lots more to come in the next hour, including...
And it is clear now that if we change how we treat women in prison, we cut crime.
Yes, that's right. The Justice Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, today unveiled plans to slash the number of women going to jail and ultimately close women's prisons altogether. Can you believe it? But do female criminals really deserve an easier ride? What happened to equality? I'll be joined by the former prison governor, Rona Hotchkiss, in just a tick.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. Are you comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister?
Which is it?
Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
A furious online debate has been sparked after, well, let's just say a rather large man, I mean, he really was big, was snapped trying to fit into his seat on a plane.
It's led to some to ask whether obese passengers should have to pay for extra plane seats so they don't inconvenience others.
Some say, though, that's cruel. So should plus-size passengers pay extra for plane seats? Let's talk to former presenter of Fat Families, Steve Miller, who's in Stratford-upon-Avon, and the director of All About Obesity, Sarah LeBrock, who's in beautiful Harrogate. Good to see you both this morning. Sarah, what do you think?
Well, we've had this debate before with Steve and I, to be fair, and I think it's one of those things where
planes are just not fit for purpose anymore. So people's bodies have been growing over the years. We know this, the obesity rates are increasing, etc. But what's happening to planes is the seats are decreasing in size. So they're just not fit for purpose and not fit for the population. So I think it's just one of these things where we need to be more empathetic to people, that they're trying to fit into an environment that isn't shaped for them at all. So I think we do need to kind of say, well, what's right here? Is it the person not being able to fit in the seat, or is it the seat not being fit for purpose for the person? And I think we need to really, look at things from that perspective as well. Instead of thinking the person's doing something wrong, how about the environment might be doing something wrong?
Steve?
It's not about blaming, but the message you can't put out, in my opinion, is that it's okay to be obese and don't worry about it. You see, what I'm saying here is free plane seats. If you're offering free plane seats, an extra seat, that's going to normalise obesity.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
This is Patrick Christys tonight with me, Ben Leo, only on GB News. And one of you have made me laugh on gbnews.com/your say. You said, Richard, good evening. Ben, Liverpool is not in the northeast, but the northwest. Stick to Essex, young man. Indeed, you're absolutely right. Slip of the tongue, which is why I have some sympathy for Keir Starmer today and the sausages gaff. Anyway, we move on. Speaking at the Labour Party conference in Liverpool early today, also taken to the stage, was the Justice Secretary, Shabana Mahmood. And she made this eye-catching policy announcement.
And it is clear now that if we change how we treat women in prison, we cut crime, we keep families together, and we end the harm that passes from one generation to the next. And for that reason, I am today announcing that this government will launch a new body, the Women's Justice Board, with the ultimate ambition of having fewer women's prisons.
OK, I'm joined now by former prison governor Rona Hotchkiss on this. Good evening, Rona. Thank you for joining me. Look, should female prisoners get an easier ride? That doesn't sound like equality to me.
Well, on a case-by-case comparable offence basis, no. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the fact that the majority of women who go to prison are there for non-violent offences. Now, I should say at the outset that we send far too many men to prison as well. So I would like to see what Ms Mahmood is proposing also looked at for the men's estate to keep more men out of prison. But the truth is we could cut the number of women in prison probably by about 2/3 if we invested in community alternatives.
So are you saying then that prisons should only be for violent offenders, both male and female?
I think it should be for violent offenders or extremely persistent offenders in an attempt to rehabilitate them in some way. But to send people to prison for non-violent offences seems to me to be an awful...
Oh, Rona, I spent some time in San Francisco last year in the infamous Tenderloin district, and their policies over there where you let anything go. You can shoplift up to $900 in California, and you'll get away with it. You won't go to prison. And do you know what's happened over there? It's turned into a crime-ridden hellhole. Could you imagine what the UK would turn into if we said to people, OK, guys, you can commit crime, as long as it's non-violent, you won't be going to prison?
So the USA has the highest rates of imprisonment in the Western world, and they also have the highest homicide rate in the Western world and the highest crime rates overall. So their policies to date haven't worked. Banging a lot of people into prison does not reduce crime. Finding effective alternatives in the communities they come from do. So what I would do with shoplifters, for example, is make them work for nothing in the shops, make them clean the staff toilets, make them clean up all the rubbish in front of the shops. Let's make the punishment fit the crime.
But Rona, again, I look to the US, and actually it's happening in the UK as well now as well. I've seen it myself. You go into, say, their version of Boots, was it Walgreens or something, everything is behind a padlock. It's all locked up. If you want to buy toothpaste or mouthwash, you have to call an assistant because everybody is on the rob. Again, could you imagine what it would turn out like here? Are you honestly saying that the UK would be better if we didn't send non-violent criminals to prison?
Yes, I do. Now, obviously, what we cannot just stop sending people to prison without proper alternatives, because we have to stop reoffending. If we do nothing to stop the offending and stop reoffending, of course the country would turn into shambles in 6 months flat. But that's not what I'm saying. I don't think that's what Ms Mahmood is saying either, because she talked about investing in community alternatives. She talked about, and I'm not a Labour voter, by the way, she talked about having more residential rehabilitation facilities for drug and alcohol addiction. And it's these kind of solutions we need, because, speaking as a former prison governor of men and women's prisons, we cannot do anything about these things in prison because we're not dealing with the causes of crime in the communities these people come from.
Well, I guess prison is meant to be a deterrent, but when they're letting them out early, and some would argue that they're akin to sort of Butlins holiday camps these days with TVs and mobile phones. Maybe you can shed some light on that. But Rona, people are saying, just like they push positive discrimination to stamp out things like racism and, inequality, they bang on about gender equality, yet come up with ideas like this. Do you see the discrepancy?
Yes, I do, if you're talking about like-for-like crimes, but most of the time we're not. As you know, men commit most of the violence in society, and women are the biggest victims. So more than half of women in prison have suffered abuse and sexual abuse, violent abuse at the hands of men, and that is part of their offending. If you're talking about women who've committed serious violent offences, then I would keep them in prison, as I would keep men who've committed serious violence offences in prison as well. OK.
Rona, just a quick one. When did you leave the industry, your prison?
5 years ago.
OK. And do you think things have changed much since then?
No, not really, no, because we're not really taking this seriously. That's why I'm delighted to hear this. But it's going to be a 5-year process, I think, for Labour. So this new justice group they've announced will be very, very important. OK, I will politely agree to disagree with you on your thoughts on criminality. But thank you for joining me, Rona Hotchkiss, your former prison governor. OK, yeah, interesting idea. Yeah, not sure if I agree. Still to come, are Labour completely out of touch with the mood of the nation on immigration? I'll tackle that next with my panel. And also, big news from the showbiz world. Philip Schofield from this morning. Remember him? Controversy last year or the year before with Qgate and whatever else. He is rumoured to be making a big comeback. More of that in the next hour.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office on GB News. It's going to turn dry for most overnight tonight. It's been a much drier day across England compared to Monday and the weekend, but there is more rain to come across the south tomorrow as this weather system starts to approach. It was this low that brought the heavy rain over the previous 48 hours. That has been clearing away, but we're still seeing quite wet conditions over northeast Scotland today. We've also had this northerly wind, which is introducing cooler air across much of the country overnight tonight. But the showers are tending to fade. We will see a few more across southern England and South Wales. It will stay quite mild here, double digits, but elsewhere with that cooler air coming in, we're into single figures and some pockets of frost likely across parts of Scotland first thing tomorrow morning. We'll still have a few showers coming in first thing as well, getting into northern Scotland. But these central parts of Scotland, that blue hue on the map, that is telling us, yes, temperatures are going to be down to freezing or a touch below through some sheltered glens. A bright start there for much of southern Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some sunshine tomorrow, just 1 or 2 showers along the north coast. Perhaps a few showers over northern England, but a good part of northern England, North Wales, actually having a fine day tomorrow. Quite grey to begin with across southern counties of England and Wales. And here comes the rain, just edging back in, initially across southwest England, South Wales, but spreading more widely over southern England and up towards the Midlands come the afternoon. As I mentioned, much of northern England, Northern Ireland, a good chunk of Scotland actually, just dry and bright tomorrow with some decent spells of sunshine. But it will be on the cool side, temperatures struggling into the low teens, a little milder further south, but not feeling all that mild with the wind and the outbreaks of rain, which will push north on Thursday and could cause some further issues as this this line of rain kind of grinds to a halt. So we do have a Met Office yellow warning in place over much of northeast England, parts of southern Scotland, Northern Ireland and North Wales also seeing a wet day, but in the south turning a little milder and a little brighter on Thursday.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You could be the...
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
It's 10 p.m. This is Patrick Christys Tonight with me, Ben Leo. So Keir Starmer's just paid off the mortgage on his £2 million house, all while pensioners freeze this winter. So what parts of this admission makes him working class?
But seriously, the flutes gave me so many opportunities. My first ever trip abroad was to Malta with the Croydon Youth Philharmonic Orchestra.
Yes, indeed, very working class. Meanwhile, the PM reckons Britain's concern over migration is simply down to skin colour.
And to those who say that the only way to love your country is to hate your neighbour because they look different, I say, not only do we reject you, we know that you will never win.
And the Home Secretary's own big speech was 1,800 words long, and she said the word immigration just 4 times.
So the Tories, with their mates in reform, are just becoming right-wing wreckers. It was arson, it was racism, it was thuggery.
And is the true cost of the monarchy actually a £500 million burden to the taxpayer? Anti-monarchists think so and want the royals out of their palaces pronto. The first of tomorrow's newspaper front pages are on the way and my panel are ready to go. Tonight, I'm joined by columnist and broadcaster Esther Krakow, director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity, Stephen Wolfe, and political commentator Jonathan Liss. And did this gaffe sum up Starmer's day?
I call again for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages, the hostages.
Labour couldn't give a fig about immigration. Next.
Good evening, I'm Sophia Wensler with your headlines just after 10 o'clock. Sir Keir Starmer has defended the cut to the winter fuel payment in his first Labour conference speech as Prime Minister. He promised that every pensioner will be better off with Labour thanks to the triple lock. He outlined a vision for national renewal, including reforming planning, ending the doctors' strike and launching Great British Energy, which he confirmed would be based in Aberdeen. The Labour leader also pledged to house all veterans in need, saying homes will be there for heroes. He also said young care leavers and victims of domestic abuse will be given a guaranteed roof over their head. Sir Keir Starmer went on to address the riots across the UK, sparked by the stabbings in Southport.
I will never let a minority of violent, racist thugs terrorise our community. The debate is not about the worth of migrants. That is toxic, and we must move beyond it. It's about control of migration. It's always been about control.
But the speech didn't go completely to plan, with the Prime Minister making an embarrassing gaffe when referring to the return of hostages in Gaza. He said sausages instead.
I call again for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages.
And it hasn't gone unnoticed, with Conservative leadership hopeful Tom Tugendhat saying Sir Keir Starmer simply can't deliver.
Look, that was a banger of a speech, but he can't even cook up a decent line. I mean, the problem is he's really made a complete hash of it, hasn't he? And none of it's worked out at all. All he's done is he's demonstrated the arrogance of somebody who simply can't deliver. Frankly, he's fried the whole thing in bananas and made a complete mess of it.
Meanwhile, the Justice Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, has set out plans to slash the number of women going to jail and ultimately close women's prisons as the country battles an overcrowding crisis.
And it is clear now that if we change how we treat women in prison, we cut crime, we keep families together, and we end the harm that passes from one generation to the next. And for that reason, I am today announcing that this government will launch a new body, the Women's Justice Board.
And in other news, the Defence Secretary, John Healey, has chaired an emergency COBRA meeting to discuss the escalating crisis in the Middle East, while the Prime Minister has called for restraint and de-escalation. It comes as the Israeli military says it has killed Hezbollah commander Ibrahim Mohammed Qubaisi in another day of Lebanon strikes targeting the terrorist militant group. At least 560 people, including women and children, have been killed so far in Lebanon's deadliest 24 hours in decades. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Ben.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good evening. Keir Starmer said the words small boats and English Channel not once in his big Labour Party conference speech today. And he muttered the word illegal migration on just one occasion in a speech that lasted more than an hour. Instead, he made the tone-deaf assumption that Britain's objection to immigration is simply about skin colour.
And to those who say that the only way to love your country is to hate your neighbour because they look different, I say, not only do we reject you, we know that you will never win because the British values we stand for, not just the rule of law, but a love for this country and our neighbours, the respect for difference under the same flag that is stronger than bricks, and you know it. It's what you cannot stand about our country, our reasonable, tolerant country, but it's absolutely who we are.
So make no mistake, the next general election will be fought on one single issue, immigration and leaving the ECHR. And Labour better understand this sharpish if they want to keep hold of power, because right now the PM is completely out of touch with Britain. Most sane-minded people do not care about skin colour. 25,000 people have crossed the Channel since in small boats this year, and I couldn't care less if there were 25,000 white Americans doing it. I do not care. Britain is full. That's the truth. It's bursting at the seams and collapsing under the weight of its exploding population. The concern isn't about skin colour, it's about our schools and hospitals and housing being overwhelmed with too many people and the grave national security risk undocumented illegal migrants pose us. Nobody, barring a few idiots, care about skin colour. And brushing off concerns about legal and illegal migration by suggesting that is, quite frankly, all it's about, is lazy at best and worst, stupid. Yvette Cooper didn't do much better in her speech earlier in the day either. Her delivery was 1,800 words long. And guess how many times she mentioned the word immigration? 4 times. Guess how many times she uttered the word migration? 6 times. So that's 10. Our Home Secretary, responsible for protecting our borders, skirting the one issue that defines mostly every other part of British life, from housing and health to education and community. Nothing on policy, nothing on how Labour's useless Border Security Command would stop the boats, and nothing on how Labour are going to reduce legal net migration. She did have time for this, though.
So don't anyone tell me that was protest. Don't anyone tell me that was about immigration or policing or poverty. Plenty of people have strong views on immigration, on crime, on the NHS and more, but they don't pick up bricks and throw them at the police. They don't set light to buildings with people inside. It was arson. It was racism. It was thuggery. It was
crime.
The Home Secretary is once again doubling down and whitewashing concerns over migration with a few mindless idiots who chose to commit crime. It wasn't just Southport that sparked protests and then the riots. It was the clear two-tier policing of the Hares Hill riots in Leeds, and earlier, the Manchester Airport alleged assault on police officers, for which, by the way, no one has been charged for any crime with yet. And those incidents left the nation worried and angry. And Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, doesn't get it. Keir Starmer doesn't get it. And Labour doesn't get the country. Their massive majority is built on flimsy foundations. Their loveless election landslide clocked a lower vote share than Jeremy Corbyn. And the electorate, particularly the Red Wall, will punish them for it. Let's get the thoughts of my panel now. Columnist and broadcaster Esther Kraku, Director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity, Stephen Wolfe, and political commentator Jonathan Liss. Jonathan, I'll start with you again, if you don't mind, because you're pulling funny faces. What's your thoughts about that? They don't get migration, do they, Labour? They, frankly, don't care about it either.
Ben, I know that GB News isn't necessarily balanced, but that was probably the most unbalanced introduction I've ever heard.
In what way?
Because it was just this complete diatribe against Labour, so rooted in one perspective.
Well, it was
I know that I'm here to provide a balance, but I kind of think that you could have approached that speech in a different way. Look,
OK, what's not true? Let's go through it point by point. It's not
about things that are not true. You didn't say anything that was factually incorrect from what I recall you saying just now. But I think that the way that you frame it is not necessarily helpful to conduce to a constructive debate. Clearly, there are a lot of people in this country who are racist. There are a lot of racists in this country. I don't think it's politically... Look, I'm not saying it's...
We haven't got any evidence there's a lot of people who are racist.
Stephen,
I mean, come on, that's a huge...
No, look, there are people...
I think it's the opposite. I think it's a small number of people who are racist.
I'm glad you think that. I happen to think there are actually more people than is... And, yeah, I'm often accused of being politically correct and snowflakey, woke, whatever, but when I dare to say something that I think is the truth, people shout me down and say, no, that's not true, that's not true. Well, I'm sorry, I think it is true.
So
now, I'm not saying that everyone who is concerned about immigration is racist. I'm not saying that. But I also think it's completely legitimate for the Prime Minister to point out there are a lot of people who don't like their neighbours because of the way they look or the way they dress or the different culture they might have.
I agree.
That's legitimate for him to point out.
But the point is they're doing that and then not addressing the legitimate concerns about migration.
But they are.
Whitewashing.
Starmer literally said in his speech that he wants to bring down net migration. And obviously, net migration is an interesting term because it means that you're having to regulate the people who leave the country as well as the people who come in. But he does want to do that. Now, I actually am much less concerned about immigration than Starmer is. But he is acknowledging that migration is an issue. He's just picking up on the people who are racist, which is fine.
I think it's one of the interesting things that you mentioned was about... where these voters, the voters that feel like the Labour Party are going to go, because they're certainly not going to go further left. The people that, as you say, are rightfully concerned about the immigration levels being too high or the fact that immigrants that are coming into this country are not socially integrating. You have communities that are living parallel lives alongside the rest of us, which is a problem because if you don't know your neighbour, you're less likely to like them. If you feel like your neighbour hasn't bought into British values, you're thinking, what is actually going on here? Who's in control? And the reality is the actual implications of this are more severe than people think. They're not going to go further to the left, right? If Labour doesn't get this right, and the British public at the end of 5 years still thinks they're either deliberately gaslighting or deliberately ignoring people, they're just going to move further right. And that space is being occupied by Reform. Reform came second in over 100 seats, almost 100 seats at the last election. The real threat on the Tories are finished. The Tories are toast. But by saying, what did Yvette Cooper say, that they're right-wing wreckers?
Right-wing wreckers, which is
fine. That's on brand for the Labour Party. But I think actually, on a practical level, she's really ignoring a huge gap in the market that has been created by this.
Stephen, Jonathan says that Starmer cares about migration, right? But he didn't mention the word small boats or English Channel once in his speech.
No, he didn't, and in reflecting on what Yvette Cooper said as well, she didn't really either, because it's really not the sort of thing that they're going to mention at their conference, because there are lots of people in the Labour Party who are, like Jonathan, not concerned that much about large-scale migration into this country, and yet they are concerned about housing. They are concerned about the cost of water and our public services. They are concerned
so how do you disconnect the two?
Well,
how do you disconnect high levels of migration?
Well, I was going to say there's a cognizant dissonance that's within the Labour Party and the socialists as a whole, who cannot understand that mass migration plus population is the driver in today's Britain of all the costs that are impacting all of society.
Okay, Stephen, look, we all know, and you know particularly, that the biggest chunk of migration in this country is people who are being let in by the government. And the reason they're being let in by the government is that they are here to fulfil gaps in our economy. The government has the right, by the way, it had the right to do this before Brexit as well, in many cases, but it certainly has the right now to turn down pretty much anyone that it doesn't want in this country. But it's not doing that, so we focus, the Conservative government, focused on the irregular or illegal migration, if you want to call it that, because that was
it's always been called, Jonathan.
No, it's
you're just doing what Starmer does and Labour are doing now, in some bizarre twist where they're saying irregular migration.
Irregular is a neutral term. Illegal migration is a loaded term.
It's a term that's been introduced by the EU, but actually, when you're doing statistics, there is very clear delineal lines between legal and illegal migration.
Well, whatever,
and that's where we come in. The point that we've got to look at is you're right that the Conservative Party made a massive mistake with some of its ways that it opened up legal migration, particularly when you allowed families of students to come across, particularly when you allowed families of people who got visas. They are massive problems too. But the overall picture is that we've led to huge population growth, 10 million people in over 20 years connected to it. 2/3 of all births in this country are caused by people who've come here in the last few years, who are migrants. All of those have an impact on the health service.
Sorry, two-thirds of all births people born are born to people who weren't born. Is that what you're saying?
That's right.
No, you didn't say that. You didn't say to people
native.
Wait, so in the last few years, so recent immigrants or people who might have been born elsewhere and they came
It doesn't really matter. The statistics.
Well, it does matter. Otherwise, the statistics useless.
Over the last 3 years, population growth has been driven 95% by migration.
My parents weren't born here. Is that a problem?
You're missing
was
the
my
point.
grandmother, but we're talking about today's figures, not about those when we didn't have the mass levels of population, when we were recovering after the Second World War, for example. What you have is the huge population growth being pushed because of migration. And then you look at housing, then you look at the cost of everything that's impacting our society. You cannot take it away. And why Starmer is wrong is because he says, I'm interested in it, I'm concerned about it, but the policies they're currently talking about are not really practical enough to deal with it. And the reason why it comes back to the vast majority of the Labour Party members are not as concerned about immigration because for some reason it doesn't impact them.
Jonathan,
that's not true. It doesn't impact them. They might just happen to agree with it.
Let me just pick you up on a point. You said that you mentioned that migration was good for the economy. They're filling holes in the economy. Well, GDP per capita has been contracting for many, many years now, all while population has been exploding. So how do you square that circle?
Well, look, Britain has a huge productivity problem, and we have massive labour shortages.
But I thought migrants, we've had uncontrolled mass migration on a scale.
Hasn't been uncontrolled. It's not uncontrolled. The government has always had control. It's literally not uncontrolled. If you've ever been to an airport in this country, you'll know there is someone, literally, even if you're British, who is checking that you have the right to come into this country. It's non-open border. It never has been. And if we hadn't had all those people coming in to work in our NHS or to work in the care sector or to go to our universities, because our universities are on the brink of failure, then it would have been even worse, I guarantee you.
Well, some of them should perhaps, because we've been over-reliant on bringing people in from different countries to kind of sustain this kind of growth that was there. But when you look at the numbers coming in, you talk about 1.6 million people who've claimed asylum and been granted the right to remain in this country who are unemployed, who are not working.
Esther,
so we've had people coming into this country that are just not filling.
Well, asylum seekers aren't allowed to. Of course, we have employment problems and skills problems in all walks.
I think it's interesting that we talk about migrants filling the gaps in our economy. No one's talking about actually let's invest in British people, British workers. Let's pay them more. Because here's the thing: the argument that many people, and I don't want to say on the left, but many people say about sort of migration and these gender genderless widgets that are not human beings, that apparently don't come with values and a culture that may or may not be compatible with Britain. It's this idea that they're just going to do these jobs like they're a bunch of robots. But the argument is never, actually, instead of importing in thousands of people to work in the care sector, for instance, for £20,000 a year, why don't we actually pay carers more?
Why can't we have both?
British workers? No, because but the thing is, you can't have both if the argument is, oh, we need more people to fill these gaps. How then do you simultaneously say, let's pay British people more? You can't have both. You have to.
As we got more people in, they become older.
Esther, the point that I would add to that is that I'd never approach migration from an economic perspective only. I think it's a huge social and cultural good, and I will defend that point.
OK. All right. Thank you all. Time now for the Great British Giveaway and your chance to win the equivalent of having an extra £3,000 a month in your bank account for the next year. That's a whopping £36,000 in tax-free cash. Here's all the details you need to make it yours. Very good luck to you. Esther, what would you do with 36 grand? Invest it, Stephen?
Put it into my SIP pension, get some extra tax money, then invest it.
Oh, it's all a bit boring so far. Jonathan, tell me you're going down Monte Carlo and putting it on red.
I'm going some really nice holidays.
Yes, good man.
There you go.
Yes.
I'm not fiscally responsible.
OK. Not financial advice, by the way, not financial advice. Anyway, coming up next, the royal family cost the taxpayer 510 million quid every year. That's according to the anti-monarchy pressure group Republic. So are taxpayers getting bang for their buck when it comes to the royals? Lifelong Republican Peter Tatchell goes head-to-head with royal journalist Sarah Robertson in just a tick.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is the nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Britain I grew up was the most peaceful, gentle society that has ever existed. That has been destroyed.
Opinion polls show immigration is the #1 concern to the British public. Are you proud to be British?
Yeah, I'm ever so proud.
My name is Stephen Edgington, and in this documentary, I want to find out how Britain became a nation of immigrants. Immigration, the truth. Available at gbnews.com.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
When I knew that I was doing this segment this week, I feel like this week was a real homework task for me because I'll be honest, I haven't been around Scottish food much in my life, but I obviously know all the obvious. And I thought I'd bring in a selection of some of, I guess, the sort of the quintessential culinary delights of the North. I mean, we have in front of us haggis.
I think we should begin with some haggis.
So, Michael, I've never eaten haggis before. This is going to be the first time.
Well, have you eaten anything like haggis before? Have you eaten anything that is made from the intestines of an animal?
I mean, I've had things like chopped liver and, you know, a bit of offal here and there.
Well, there we are. I mean, I got a great surprise. I was holding a great... When I was in government, I was holding a great party in Scotland, and I had a lot of Spanish visitors, and I was offering them haggis, and I thought that they would be astonished by haggis and maybe repelled. But when they ate it, they said, oh, no, this is morcilla. So, you know, there is an equivalent in Spain.
Absolutely.
So if I recall, and you've probably been mugging it up, which I have not, but haggis is made within the stomach of a sheep.
Yes.
And you take the heart and the lungs and some other part of the sheep and you mash it up.
With onions, oatmeal, suet.
Yes.
And it's stuffed into the sheep's stomach. But a lot of the haggis you get these days, especially sort of the slightly cheaper varieties in supermarkets, it's usually an artificial casing. Oh. You know what? This is actually quite nice.
I think it's absolutely heavenly. And
it's very savoury.
To me, it's two things. Yes, to me, it's two things. It's both the taste and the texture. You quite rightly refer to the oatmeal going in there. So it's got this crunchy, granular sort of texture. Marvellous.
GB News, the People's Channel.
The king of breakfast TV is back. That's right. Britain's favourite TV host, Eamon Holmes, returns to Britain's hottest breakfast programme. Breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Patrick Christys tonight with me, Ben Leo, only on GB News. Now, the anti-monarchist group Republic have today released a report claiming that the royal family cost the taxpayer £510 million a year. That figure includes income from the duchies of Lancaster and Cornwall, as well as estimating the cost of security for members of the royal family and the salaries for government staff seconded to the palace. The report also includes an estimate that royal engagements around the country cost local councils £31.9 million a year. Republic are calling for the royal family budget to be capped at a measly £5 million to £10 million a year, with the King granted a salary of just over £185,000. So, are the royals worth the money? Joining me now to debate this is royal journalist Sarah Louise Robertson and human rights campaigner and activist Peter Tatchell. Good evening to you both. Peter, first of all, I'm not quite sure about the accuracy of this research because, of course, they get the royals get a massive slice of the sovereign grant from the Crown Estate, which in recent years has been very, very lucrative. Most of it, by the way, goes to the Treasury. So, I mean, what's your thoughts on this research?
Well, just recently, the royals have had a £45 million hike in their taxpayer income.
Yeah, and why was
Taxpayers paying an extra £45 million a year, starting next year, for the royal family.
Peter, why was that?
Well, that is said to be for various tasks and things that need to be done, but it shouldn't go to the royal family. It should go to the Public Works Department. The Public Works Department should fund it, not the royals. And you're quite right, a huge amount of money, about £99 million, is taken by the royals from the duchies of Lancaster and Cornwall. Now, these are very rich people. The royal family have a personal private wealth of over £2 billion. King Charles inherited £1.8 billion from his late mother, and he didn't pay a penny in inheritance tax. So why are we giving him, as well, him and the Prince of Wales, the £99 million from the duchies of Lancaster and Cornwall? That is obscene. That's obscene at a time of a cost of living crisis when pensioners are having their winter fuel allowances cut.
Sarah Louise, would you like to explain why they got a boost in the sovereign grant? Do you know why?
Well, it's because of everything's gone up. Cost of living's gone up. The cost of maintaining the palaces has gone up. We also don't know how much the security does cost. I imagine that's gone up as well, but that has to remain secret due to the very nature of it.
Can I interrupt you, Sarah Louise? Sorry. Sorry to be rude. Before we move on to another point, I'm just going to tell Peter why they got a boost. It's because the Crown Estate sold off loads of seabed land to wind farm estates, so they got a massive, I think it was £1.3 billion profit, which far exceeds anything of recent years. As a result, they cut the percentage of the sovereign grant to 12%. So they're taking less of a cut, but it's because they earn more money. So,
but why should the royals own the seabed? The seabed around the British Isles should belong to the British people. It should not belong to the royal family.
Look, Peter, please. They cost the taxpayers on average 77p per person per household a year. That is minuscule in terms of what they give back. The revenue that is generated into this country through the royal family can't even be put into words. It is so huge. That's why so many tourists come to this country to look at the palaces. We have to pay to maintain those in order to bring the tourists in. But the revenue that they generate, and they are what keeps Britain as a premier country on the world stage. Even Alan Johnson, ex-Labour MP Alan Johnson, just to quote him here, said, no serious politician will ever think about having a republic because of the turmoil. He put it in his words, Brexit was bad enough, but most people, even Republicans, would say, just let it be. We haven't got time right now when the world and the country is in such an unstable place to be talking about these things. As I say, they only cost us 77p per person. They are value for money. They are part of British history. They've been ruling for over 1,000 years. Why would you want to change that now? And what on earth would you replace them with? When we've just seen the current Labour government what's going on there, the scandals there, and to also conflate the royal family with the government's decision to cut fuel allowance for pensioners. Why are we blaming the King for something that Keir Starmer's Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, is bringing in? That's nothing to do with the King. That's the Labour's decision to do that, to be cruel to pensioners.
Peter, the reason why it's relevant is because, as I said, the royals have a personal private fortune of over £2 billion. Yet we are allowing them... Let me speak, please. Let me speak, please. So why are we then allowing them to take £99 million out of the duchies of Lancaster and Cornwall on top of that? Because that's gross. That's grossly unfair.
Because Peter, the Crown has...
They pay capital gains. King Charles pays capital gains. It's what they generate back. It exceeds what they're taking out. That they are amazing value for money. I can't stress this again and again and again. Whatever you would replace them with, God forbid it would be some sort of dictator or something, would end up costing far, far more. And I always say to people, you know, people who want to live in a republic, there's plenty of Republican countries out there for people to move to. Go and try living in one and see how you get on.
The Irish and German presidencies, democratically elected, they cost... Excuse me, you're very rude interrupting. I didn't interrupt you. The Irish and German presidencies, which are democratically elected or appointed, they have a budget, an annual budget and cost of just a few £1 million compared to the official figure of 86 million, soon to go up to 132 million pounds for our royal family. And of course, as we've said, the real cost, if you look at the extra money that's taken out of the duchies of Lancaster and Cornwall and lost income, look, you know, the royals have between them 23 palaces and luxury residences.
Why, just because they've got money that they've invested and saved over the years and whatever else, why should they work for free?
It's all stolen. It's all stolen. They shouldn't. They shouldn't. They should not. They should not. I'm not asking them to work for free. I'm saying they should not have this extravagant lifestyle in a time of a cost of living crisis when the mass of people in this country are suffering. The royals should pinch their belts, tighten their belts, and make do with a little bit less. That's all I'm saying.
OK, last word to you, Sarah Louise.
They have tightened their belts. King Charles, as you know, wants a slimmed-down monarchy, and we've seen what's happened there when he's ended up with cancer, and the Princess of Wales has recently fought a battle with cancer. We can't slim it down any further. They are fantastic value for money. Look how much work they do. The King's still working. He's about to go on tour to Australia and Samoa. I mean, is that a journey you would want to take at that age?
Okay.
Having to work each day to try and obviously keep the interest in the Commonwealth and to show that he's still head of state. They carry out such an invaluable job.
Yeah, all right, Peter, I will just say they... OK, Peter, I will say they have tightened their belts because they've reduced their slice of the Crown estate profits to 12%.
Yeah, but their profits have actually hugely increased. They've reduced the percentage, but the actual money they're getting is far, far greater than ever.
And, Peter, the rest of it goes to the Treasury. So I'm not sure what you're complaining about and why you'd want to be like Germany as well. I don't know. Anyway, Peter,
Ireland. I mean, we're a completely different country to Ireland. Yes, the Irish haven't had monarchy for hundreds of years, but much more people prefer to visit Great Britain than what they do the Republic of Ireland.
We've got to go. Thank you to you both, Sarah Louise Robertson and Peter Tatchell. Thank you for joining me this evening. Yeah, I'd rather be like Great Britain and not Germany or Ireland. Thank you very much. Anyway, still to come, I'll have the very first of tomorrow's newspaper front pages hot off the press with my panel. Oh, and did this embarrassing gaffe sum up Starmer's day?
I call again for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages, the hostages.
All that and much more in just a few minutes. Stay with us.
Good evening. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office on GB News. It's going to turn dry for most overnight tonight. It's been a much drier day across England compared to Monday and the weekend, but there is more rain to come across the south tomorrow as this weather system starts to approach. It was this low that brought the heavy rain over the previous 48 hours. That has been clearing away, but we're still seeing quite wet conditions over northeast Scotland today. We've also had this northerly wind, which is introducing cooler air across much of the country overnight tonight. But the The showers are tending to fade. We will see a few more across southern England and South Wales. It will stay quite mild here, double digits, but elsewhere with that cooler air coming in, we're into single figures and some pockets of frost likely across parts of Scotland first thing tomorrow morning. We'll still have a few showers coming in first thing as well, getting into northern Scotland, but these central parts of Scotland, that blue hue on the map, that is telling us, yes, temperatures are going to be down to freezing or a touch below through some sheltered glens. A bright start, though, for much of southern Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some sunshine tomorrow, just 1 or 2 showers along the north coast. Perhaps a few showers over northern England, but a good part of northern England, North Wales, actually having a fine day tomorrow. Quite grey to begin with across southern counties of England and Wales. And here comes the rain, just edging back in, initially across southwest England, South Wales, but spreading more widely over southern England and up towards the Midlands come the afternoon. As I mentioned, much of northern England, Northern Ireland, a good chunk of Scotland actually, just dry and bright tomorrow with some decent spells of sunshine. But it will be on the cool side, temperatures struggling into the low teens. A little milder further south, but not feeling all that mild with the wind and the outbreaks of rain, which will push north on Thursday and could cause some further issues as this line of rain kind of grinds to a halt. So we do have a Met Office yellow warning in place over much of northeast England, parts of southern Scotland, Northern Ireland and North Wales also seeing a wet day, but in the south turning a little milder and a little brighter on Thursday.
I'm Nana Acquia. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
I'm Emily Carver. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Patrick Christys tonight with me, Ben Leo, only on GB News. I won't tell you what the panel have just been talking about because even after the watershed, I don't think I can tell you. Anyway, the first newspaper front pages have just dropped. We'll start with The Sun. I love this story. I love it and I'm here for it. Phil, I'm back on TV 16 months after sacking. Opens heart on survival show. Philip Schofield is making his TV comeback 16 months after being fired from ITV's This Morning. The Star, 62, has secretly filmed a one-man survival show called Castaway for Channel 5. Right, we're going to talk about that in just a second. I want to know more. Daily Express. Kate's back at work to prepare for Christmas concert. Some really good news on the royal front. The Princess of Wales showed her determination to return to work after her cancer ordeal as she planned for her Christmas Carol concert. The Metro. 10 years to end zombie apocalypse. It's the Home Secretary Yvette Cooper's plans to tackle knife crime. She wants to halve it within the decade. The Daily Mail, Marines ready for mass evacuation of Lebanon, or Brits in Lebanon. 700 UK troops rushed to the region to mount potential Dunkirk-style rescue of up to 10,000 British nationals. 10,000, that sounds like quite a lot. I wonder what they're all doing in Lebanon. And the Eye, EU willing to back down on new migration demand for all under 30s. And Sir Keir Starmer, top right-hand side there. Pylons and prisons are essential for UK growth, Starmer tells NIMBYs. I am a self-confessed NIMBY and I'm proud of it. I don't want these horrible new build estates blighting the lovely green spaces I have near my house. Thank you very much. Right, should we talk about the... it's a true point. If they made new...
No, I don't doubt you. It's just kind of
if they made new builds, like, you know...
They've got to be built, Luke. We need houses, Ben. They've got to be built somewhere.
Yeah, I did make this point. I don't want to see like ugly utilitarian shoeboxes.
No character.
Festooned across. Like, I do think they should try and...
They have to be soulless.
I think there's a conversation about, like, architecture, cheap architecture.
Everyone deserves good architecture.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
I think that's the point he's making.
if Labour's building one.
I want to talk about something much more important than the need to build housing. That's Philip Schofield, because the ex-ITV man
I'd rather talk
is
about housing.
set to make his TV return on Channel 5's reality show Castaway, where he'll be stranded on a Madagascan tropical island for 10 days. The show, that was filmed in secret, is expected to dive deep into his past 2 years of hell since being axed from ITV. And here's an image that's been released of Schofield on the island. I mean, they could have been of him on the island or him in the aftermath of his ITV scandal. Who knows? Guys, you don't care about Philip Schofield, Esther?
So what kind of houses would you like to see around?
You want to talk about...
I'm just seeing this man. He looks like he's just been sat in the waiting room at hell, and he's just been seen by Lucifer. I mean, he's just, you know...
so
it's not a good look.
I've been to Madagascar. Anyone been to Madagascar?
I'd love to go.
I've seen the film,
yeah,
which is very enticing.
Footage includes him. Footage includes Schofield discussing his 2 years from hell since admitting to an affair with a younger co-worker. A source said he wanted a chance to share his story unedited and honest.
Why is he describing it as hell? Like nobody.
I'd rather have my eyebrows plucked by a cat's teeth than watch Phil Schofield.
Some people pay a lot of money for that, Steve.
I think that'd be more entertaining than watching Phil.
Steve, are you not interested? Fair enough, you're not interested in This Morning and ITV and celebrities.
I'm not interested in a failure. Like he did something that he's done. Like he's out of the picture. Never really enjoyed it.
The human psychology of it, the rise and the fall and the comeback, isn't.
Should he be a castaway?
People think it's a great
This isn't Rocky. This isn't Rocky 3. No. You know, this is Phil Schofield 1.
I wouldn't have called myself a fan of Philip Schofield while he was a presenter anyway, but I do think that it was quite unfair what happened to him because he didn't do anything illegal. There was no one ever came forward with credible allegations that merited a police investigation, but he was treated like a paedophile, and I thought that was really unfortunate. And so,
what do you think about what he did do and admitted to, an inappropriate relationship with a younger?
Yeah, a lot of people have inappropriate relationships at work with consenting adults, and there may be professional consequences, but he was treated like a criminal.
I think what I had an issue with, and this was before the whole story came out, was the fact that when he came out on TV and said, you know, he'd always known that he was gay and that he'd ended his relationship with his wife. I actually felt sorry for his wife because I can't imagine being in a almost 30-year relationship with someone who, on the day he said "I do," knew that he was gay. That's not to say that I have a problem with him being gay. Of course, you live in a free country, be happy with who you are. But I think there was a callousness with which he treated his wife and a complete disregard for the fact that she's basically tied her life to someone who was never meant to be.
It's also none of our business, Austen. It's got nothing to do with that he has a TV career.
That doesn't mean me saying that is just that's me disapproving of him. That doesn't mean I think he should have had his career destroyed. That's just me saying I think that's the moral stance I'm taking. If as a woman I would be very, very, very upset.
Well, Stephen, the argument is that it perhaps is viewers' business and his boss's business and ITV's business because he's portraying or was portraying, you know, this squeaky clean image. And yet he was deceiving his family and his kids.
Well, that's exactly where I would go. If there's a deception that he's portraying to his family and then trying to do a different persona onto TV and gaining financial wealth because of that, then I think that's really where I lose interest in people like him. I'm not interested in his comeback because I think he's had a good time. He earned enough money ineffectively. He wants to get a career back. He wants us all to love him once more.
Everyone's entitled to earn money. Everyone's entitled to have a career.
I agree.
If people want to give him money, then he's entitled to take it.
I don't think people...
This is a PR rap for him.
Unless the action is egregious and basically criminal, I'm very uncomfortable with people's livelihoods being completely destroyed. I agree with you there. I don't think, in as much as I disapprove of what he did, I would never say that someone should completely lose their livelihood unless what they've done is actually criminal.
Do you think he deserves a second chance in TV?
Well, he never got a first chance from me, so I don't really care.
Oh, come on, he was a big star.
I do not care. I've never watched anything he was in.
I remember with Gordon the Gopher just about.
Yeah, there he is. Look, if you're looking, watching on TV, this image. Again, I joke, it could have been from the days after the ITV scandal broke. He did that infamous interview where he was puffing on a vape.
I mean, look at him. He looks like he's just got...
Has he got the same photographer as Angela Rayner? He looks like a professional photographer, just done... This will look sympathetic for people.
People will want to watch this. Bottom line.
Esther, I will oblige to you, and if you fancy, we'll talk about NIMBYism after the break.
OK, yes, please, yeah. And architecture.
Yes, why not? OK, coming up, more of the rest of tomorrow's newspaper front pages, hot off the press. Back in a tick.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Good morning, everybody. I honestly think Gen Z are as lazy as we've been made out. I was on GB News a couple of months ago talking about a report which suggested that they were very lazy, very work shy, and I honestly don't think that's the case. I respect my elders, so I'm certainly not going to sit here and blame them for the slow return to many offices across the country. But I am actually 20. I've run businesses since I was 15 and 16, since I dropped out of school, and I have always been pro-office, right? So I fit right into that Generation Z category, and I think the office environment is fantastic, not just professionally, but socially for young people, especially kind of after COVID, and it halted a lot of their social plans or people going to university, etc. I think getting people into the office, being surrounded by the more senior people, the people with more experience, which is what we're talking about, older people, is actually incredibly positive. But I think Generation Z get a lot of stick in the media, and I'm often sat here debating this about them being called lazy. I guess I think probably what's different is technology is advanced, so people's jobs are a lot quicker, and Generation Z have obviously grew up with that technology, therefore in a position to do jobs quicker. And I guess that's kind of where that kind of narrative has come from, because Gen Z do really kind of go with the whole work smarter, not harder kind of mentality, which is often met with a little bit of stick.
I'm not knocking the young generation at all. I mean, I'm just saying it's by experience. Undoubtedly, they're not as hard-working as the more experienced worker, but I'm certainly not knocking them on that basis. If they had the opportunity, I'm sure there'd be more and more would want to get into the workplace. But unfortunately, I think this COVID has changed the world, and it's made younger people more lazy than older people. Older people just can't wait to, well, shouldn't say that, can't wait to get out of the house to get to work.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Patrick Christys tonight with me, Ben Leo, only on GB News. More front pages have just dropped hot off the press. We'll start with the Daily Telegraph. The states will take back control. Keir Starmer uses Brexit war cries to appeal to reform voters as he issues warning over free markets. That's off the back of his big conference speech earlier today. He's got a habit of nicking reform policy, hasn't he? Daily Mirror. Starmer's promise, tough love. PM says he'll fix economy and then build Britain to last. He vows for a brighter future if he makes the hard choices now. Are you listening, pensioners? And The Guardian, keep the faith and Britain will prosper, urges Keir Starmer. The PM says trade-offs and tough decisions needed after 14 years of Tory rule. OK, Esther, it's your lucky day because we're going back to your favourite topic, NIMBYism, houses and architecture. If we get the eye just back up, the top right-hand side, a little smidge, where Starmer, from his speech today, said pylons and prisons are essential for UK growth, Starmer tells NIMBYs. And he was warning people that, you know, some of you are going to have to live next to prisons. Some of you are going to have to live next to new build housing estates. But my point, Esther, as a NIMBY, is I wouldn't mind if they built...
Is that your middle name?
NIMBY.
Ben NIMBY.
It can be, why not?
Ben NIMBY Leo.
I wouldn't mind if these houses were characterful, they looked nice, they had, you know, nice green spaces surrounding them, parks and so on. But I've passed many a new build estate down where I live in West Sussex, and they are just completely soulless.
Yeah, they're utilitarian shoeboxes.
Yeah.
And I think there's something to be said about people's investment in a community that they actually think looks nice. Like, no one wants to live in a hole in the ground or in an ugly space. I think we really need to talk about architecture in this country, and not just because we need more houses, just put up ugly sort of flats and just festoon them across the sort of various towns and cities across the UK. So that's what I would say. I think there should be an emphasis. There should be some sort of incentivization of councils to say, look, this must blend in with the community. You don't get to just put up ugly buildings and say, here's your housing.
But a lot of the policies are set down by central government in terms of the square, how much housing has to go on an acre, how the land has to be structured as well, and there's less chance for councils actually to be able to decide what type of design is there, but all because of the way that the government has worked with the building industry to allow this to grow. And I remember very clearly some friends of mine who'd come over from Belgium and were taking them through Winchester, and this huge new estate just outside of Winchester, where you'd think all that money that's there, these houses were over £500,000 to £1 million. And the comment from them was, is that a prison? Is that a prison? Because it just looked that... And they said that looked like a prison block in Belgium. And one of the biggest problems that we have in the UK is that land is only owned by large developments because of the way of our planning system. Across Europe, you can buy plots of land and build your own homes on there.
Yeah.
We are not able to do that so much in this UK. If really wants to build houses, get us to have nice houses, allow the planning system to change so that individual plots...
I think they are talking about that, though, aren't they? They are talking about reforming planning laws.
Planning passports, he's calling it. So basically, I think the suggestion is that you can just build and then retrospectively they'll come around and ensure that it's all according to local
well, obviously,
guidelines.
there's an issue as well because when you're trying to get permission, you have to make sure that it's in keeping with the character of the local area. So there is obviously going to have to be some kind of safeguards because people would complain if you had a beautiful row of cottages and someone kind of just like built a tower block.
Something that looked like McDonald's.
Well, it seems like there's soon to be yet another Labour civil war because Starmer today warning that putting up more electricity pylons in the countryside is something they're going to have to do. But several Labour MPs have already come out and said...
They're just ugly.
Yeah, they said no.
But look, you even had something about in the Green Party about this. There's nothing new in politics that you have a party agreeing on a policy, but then individual MPs have to respond to their constituents' concerns.
Let me show you one of the, unfortunately for Starmer, one of the most defining moments from the speech today. Can you guess what it is? This is the moment he tried to address the conflict in the Middle East.
I call again for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the return of the sausages, the hostages.
Jonathan, what a sausage.
I mean, anyone who's been on live television has slipped up occasionally.
Yeah, I was about to say,
I have.
You've been speaking for over half an hour. I think we should be a bit kinder to him.
Yeah, I am.
It happens.
So I'm just not. All I can think of is that little dog that in the 80s, sausages, sausages, sausages. And I think he'll be defined as I say...
On the Hamas tunnel.
Yeah, that's it.
That's a grim image.
Running out. No, I just thought it was funny.
No,
yes, he makes mistakes.
I do sympathise. I've said some very silly... I mean, in the handover earlier with Jacob Rees-Mogg, I was meant to say Philharmonic Orchestra, and I said Philmonic. Oh, no. So I said I messed it up anyway. I butchered it completely. So I do sympathise with him. Anyway, let's get on to tonight's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. Esther, your Greatest Britain, please.
Keir Starmer, for the moment of the day with the sausage comment, bless him. I'm saying that just because I actually think this is probably one of the best speeches he delivered in terms of his mannerisms. He's actually got better as someone who gives speeches.
Boris Johnson calls him the human bollard. You don't agree with that?
Well, he is, but bollards can get better.
Yeah, all right.
He doesn't have to remain stagnant.
Only when you've hit them.
Of course, we don't condone any of that. Stephen Wolfe, who's your...
I think it's got to be the British soldiers at Arnhem.
Yes.
Absolutely. There they are, supporting them. Still going, still being honourable, still being the decent people that they are.
Yeah, it was the 80th anniversary, of course, of Arnhem. All the Allied... it was bloody, to say the least. Thousands of Allied and, indeed, German soldiers losing their lives. We technically lost the battle, of course, because we couldn't claim the third bridge, but Charlie Peters did some sterling work in Holland or the Netherlands last week reporting on that, and no other broadcaster did. Jonathan Liss, your Greatest Britain, please.
Angela Rayner. It's got to be Angela Rayner. Because this is a woman who the right-wing press has got it in for her, and the biggest story over the weekend was the fact that she took her boyfriend on holiday with her. And I just think, give her a break. And so...
that's as feminist as it gets. No boyfriend of mine could expect a holiday. Absolutely not.
Let's be completely clear about going on holiday. Where did she go on holiday and who paid for it?
She went to New York over the festive period and she stayed in her friend's apartment. And the friend is a Labour...
Lord Ali's $2.5 million New York...
Right. And in the same way that if you were going to New York and you had a friend, or you were lucky enough to have a friend who had a place there, they might let you stay as well. But the story was not that. The story was that she took her boyfriend with her.
Did she pay for the boyfriend?
He was an MP. And he obviously stayed in the flat as well.
For the boyfriend,
the point is that was his responsibility to carry it because he was an MP.
Okay, but hold on.
We've got a minute left.
Did she pay for the boyfriend?
Well, he paid for his own flights.
Absolutely.
And then he stayed with her in the flat.
Today's Greatest Britain is all the soldiers at Arnhem. What to say. Charlie Peters, as I said, did an amazing job, and respect to those people. We must never forget what happened. Your Union Jackass, very quickly, Esther. We're running out of time.
Prince Harry.
Why?
for wanting to replace mental health, the term mental health, with mental fitness, because we do mental sit-ups if we're mentally depressed or something or other.
Stephen Wolfe.
I don't know, Mick Lynch, because I think Mick Lynch wants to take control of Britain for the union.
He wants to unionise the
unionise
UK,
Britain.
Take us back to the 1970s. Jonathan Liss, your Union Jackass.
Robert Jenrick. rhetoric over the weekend about English identity was completely indistinguishable from the stuff we used to hear from the BNP and Nick Griffin in the 90s. I think it's completely despicable.
Stephen's screwing his face up. The Union Jackass for today is Prince Harry. I can understand sometimes people saying, you know, maybe we should take the word manpower out of things and all this woke stuff. I don't agree with it, but this doesn't even make sense. What's he saying?
Mental fitness.
He's replacing mental health with mental fitness.
Yeah.
The word
you can
health...
do mental press-ups.
So the word health is offensive to who? I don't get it.
Well, he's completely out of touch. This is someone who's never had to work a day in his life.
All right, well, he's our Union Jackass for today. Esther, Stephen, Jonathan, thank you for joining me. Thank you at home for joining me as well. Patrick is back tomorrow from 9 p.m. Next up, it's Headliners, and that's after your weather with Alex Deakin. Good night.
Good night.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office on GB News. It's going to turn dry for most overnight tonight. It's been a much drier day across England compared to Monday and the weekend, but there is more rain to come across the south tomorrow as this weather system starts to approach. It was this low that brought the heavy rain over the previous 48 hours. That has been clearing away, but we're still seeing quite wet conditions over northeast Scotland today. We've also had this northerly wind, which is introducing cooler air across much of the country overnight tonight. But the showers are tending to fade. We will see a few more across southern England and South Wales. It will stay quite mild here, double digits, but elsewhere with that cooler air coming in, we're into single figures and some pockets of frost likely across parts of Scotland first thing tomorrow morning. We'll still have a few showers coming in first thing as well, getting into northern Scotland, but these central parts of Scotland, that blue hue on the map, that is telling us, yes, temperatures are going to be down to freezing or a touch below through some sheltered glens. A bright start there for much of southern Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some sunshine tomorrow, just one or two showers along the north coast. Perhaps a few showers over northern England, but a good part of northern England, North Wales, actually having a fine day tomorrow. Quite grey to begin with across southern counties of England and Wales. And here comes the rain, just edging back in, initially across southwest England, South Wales, but spreading more widely over southern England and up towards the Midlands come the afternoon. As I mentioned, much of northern England, Northern Ireland, a good chunk of Scotland actually, just dry and bright tomorrow with some decent spells of sunshine. But it will be on the cool side, temperatures struggling into the low teens. A little milder further south, but not feeling all that mild with the wind and the outbreaks of rain, which will push north on Thursday and could cause some further issues as this line of rain kind of grinds to a halt. So we do have a Met Office yellow warning in place over much of northeast England, parts of southern Scotland, Northern Ireland and North Wales also seeing a wet day, but in the south turning a little milder and a little brighter on Thursday.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
There's an incredible luck. Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
With her novels Persuasion and Northanger Abbey both set in Bath, the city has taken to honouring their author each year with the Jane Austen Festival. Over 3,500 Austen fans flock to the city, many in their Regency finery and many coming from abroad. You can join the throng and follow the author along streets whose buildings look much the same as when she strolled past them over 200 years ago. Dating back to 2001, the festival is the world's largest and longest-running celebration of the Romance writer. Originally created by the Jane Austen Centre in Bath and running over the course of one weekend, 23 years on, it's grown into a 10-day festival with more than 80 events. And to tell us more, I'm delighted to be joined now by author and broadcaster Jenny Trent Hughes. Jenny, let's have a look at you. You look absolutely splendid. Well, welcome to GB News. Tell me a little bit about what you're wearing.
I'm wearing, well, usually I have a character called the Queen of All Hearts, and I have a fantastic outfit designed by Bath Theatrical. I was on the way up to you this morning. I was so excited I was going to meet you finally, and because of the trains, I didn't get to come. So I had to run back to my boat. I live on a boat, which is why the background is a bit odd, and I'm in a Regency outfit.
Well, look, I'm absolutely delighted that you have put the outfit on for us, because also someone was bringing a dress to you and her train was cancelled as well. So dressing up is obviously a big part of it. Have you any idea how many people dress up in order to participate?
Quite a few thousand.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, I'm Sophie.